Hello everyone, welcome to Hometown Heroes. I'm Mike Kenichi, and I am excited tonight because tonight we are going to take a different approach and we are going to celebrate the 1985 Derby Football Red Raiders Class S champions. And we have two members from that outstanding team with us tonight. We have former defensive standout and PA kicker John Bogart, and we also have two-way lineman and all-state lineman Danny Shea. And gentlemen, I want to thank you for coming on tonight. This is an absolute honor. It's hard to believe it's been 31 years now, but without a doubt, a great team. I think what I want to ask you both first is, how did your introduction to Derby football begin, John?
It started with Buster Jadek. For those of you
Right.
who don't know, legendary Hall of Fame wrestling coach. He was really active with us as kids when we were 8. And he got us into Pop Warner, and beyond being a great football player and a teacher, he made practices fun. And he teamed up with Carmen DeCenzo, Charlie's brother, and a couple other guys like Jay Hemstock and Joe Ukanowitz, former great Derby players. And we had some great teams talent-wise, but we had a lot of fun. And I think that's kind of when we all started bonding at that age. So, you know, as important as it was playing well in the field, it was equally as important going to Roseland after and getting pizza together.
Right. Now, let me ask you this. Were you a fan of Derby football? You were little, obviously, but were you a fan before you ever put on a pair of pads? I mean, when you were, like, say, 5 years old, did your parents get you into it right away?
I moved from Ansonia to Derby when I was 8.
Oh, wow.
So the second we moved and I started playing, that was the first year I was.
Were you an Ansonia fan before that, or
I'd gone to a couple of games, but you know, I was told I went to games, but I really don't recall much of it. So I was pretty young.
Now, Dan, you kind of lived on the east side of Derby over there, I believe, Genetti Drive, and you know, obviously Carmen didn't live too far from you, so I'm sure
right across
he was
the street.
right. How old would you say your journey began?
I played as a peewee. I think I was 10 years old then.
Right.
And unfortunately, I skipped my 7th grade year, which would have been my junior midget year, and I would have played for Carmen and Buster and those guys. For some reason, I decided not to play that year. But I did come back as a midget, and in fact, John Oka was our head coach at the time.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So that was really when I truly, I guess, became a Derby Red Raider and fell in love with the town and you grow up and we grew up not too far away from Bobby Orchano, who was obviously a legend, and so it was just that's when I started to feel it.
Right, and you two both started at a time too where Derby football really took off. It was the Lou DiFilippo era. So going to games at age 8 and 9, I mean, you're seeing these teams just dominate opponents. They had a long winning streak against Ansonia. They had some great players in John Pagliaro, his cousin Brian, who was very good, Marty Palange, a lot of those guys. So, I mean, you guys kind of were you were at a time where you were very motivated to put on the pads.
Yeah, those names you mentioned that was Derby football. The John Pagliaros and the Vinny Greco's, Brent Sanford. Those are names we grew up, kind of idolized and probably never met them, but that was the lore of Derby football. Right.
Now, as John mentioned, he was from Ansonia at the time. Did your parents grow up in Derby, or were they kind of new to Derby as well?
My mom went to Ansonia High School. And
okay.
My dad came from New Haven.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, but I think they moved to Derby in maybe 74.
Right.
No, I know it had to be 68 when I was born, yeah.
Right. So now let me ask you this. Did you both begin football together like Pop Warner? I mean, were you both on the same team, or how old? You said you were 8, obviously.
He was.
You said 10, I believe.
He was always the next division up. I was with Mark Orchano, Ron Sheehy, Mark Searles. I was with those guys, and Dan was with primarily the next grade up because you were one of the bigger kids, So we didn't really actually play all that much till freshman year together.
No. Ironically, our high school team was split between the junior midget team and the midget team. Like I said, I had myself, Mike Jadek, Jimmy Stewart, and you had the other guys.
A bunch of the other guys.
Yeah.
So, but it was nice coming together as freshmen, because I think both teams were pretty good. But when we put it all together, it kind of clicked when we were freshmen.
Yeah.
Right. And, I'm sure every Saturday going to games, 10:30 in the morning, 1:30 in the afternoon, gave you something to look forward to on a Saturday. There was no technology back then, thankfully. There was not a lot of this stuff we have today. So playing out in the backyard, playing football, playing basketball, and going to these games was like, it was a ritual at Derby every year. I mean, you guys get pumped up that Friday being in school, knowing there was a Derby game the next day?
Absolutely, absolutely. When I moved to Derby, I lived 2 houses away from Mark Orchano, our running back,
right.
Great running back. And Bobby was 4 or 5 years older than us, so I was taken to games to see Bobby Orchano as a freshman and then on the JVs, and they quickly moved him to varsity. And what I thought was cool, 2 particular athletes that I really looked up to were Bobby and Ben Blue,
right.
because they treated the kids like gold. They were it for us, and you'd go up to them and they'd ask you how you were doing and comment on what you were doing in football.
Right.
And I don't know, I guess in small town Derby, that's like talking to a celebrity, right?
Yeah.
It really was for us.
Yeah.
Football players that had success like them, we idolized them.
Right. Now let me ask you this, and you could both answer this. You go to that first football practice, it's something new. I don't care if you're 14 years old, if you're 8 years old. It's, it's something you have to get used to. Football's not for everyone. Some kids don't really like hitting, head to head like that with their helmets. It's a grind and it's a tough physical sport. Let's say the first week, because, the first week is like conditioning, then you go into pads. Was there ever a time where you, John Bogart, or you, Dan Shea, said, you know what, this just isn't for me. I don't want to do this. Were you kind of nervous in the beginning?
Well, I think, yeah, for me, like I said, I didn't play my 7th grade year because my 6th grade year, I kind of hated it.
Right.
I got beat up a lot. We used to have to scrimmage the junior midgets, so I was going up against like Jeff Rice and Damian Carloni and those big kids, and it was tough. That's a tough introduction to football.
Right.
So I think that 7th grade year, I just kind of took it off, but I missed it, and so I'm glad I came back.
Right, and I'm sure were you feeling regret that year? You're only in 7th grade, so I think maybe the regret is seeing kids come to school in the jersey and stuff like that. That's probably the biggest thing, but you're still kind of young, so, you don't really think about regrets as much, but did you say, in the beginning, I'm playing next year, maybe after the first few weeks?
Yeah, it was tough when, all the guys would be coming in and,
right.
They typically wear their jerseys on Fridays. And I felt like I wasn't part of that group, and
Now, did you play other sports as well? Or?
I did. I played baseball and basketball, but
and to that point, or to your question, football was kind of like a given in Derby.
Yeah,
like it was a privilege, I guess very early coming into the town, it became evident that was the sport.
Right.
It really was. So. My first 2 years of Pop Warner, I got knocked off my feet quite often, and in my last 2 years, I turned around and turned into more of a football player. But I loved every second of it.
Right.
I hurt a little bit, but I loved it because I felt like I was becoming part of something that was great, and being brand new to this town, trying to get to know everybody and being a part of that was a really important part of my life.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing about Pop Warner too, I don't know how it is today, but back then, you did a lot more hitting in practice in the Pop Warner level than you did in the high school level, because you can't have people getting hurt. So the hitting, they kind of water it down a little bit. So really, Pop Warner is when you really learn how to tackle, when you really learn how to block, where you really learn how to hit. It's a lot tougher sometimes practice-wise than, say, high school, because, you're going at it 2 hours just hitting and hitting all the time.
Yeah, there wasn't the restrictions that there are
Right.
today. We hit
We hit.
all the time.
We hit on the way to get water, and we hit on the way to get.
Right.
Yeah.
Now let me ask you this. I know back then too, coaches could be intense. That's the only way to prepare kids back then is, after practice, everybody's buddies, but on the field, there's a job to do. So coaches can be intense sometimes. Was that something that, you kind of said, well, this isn't for me, I don't like getting yelled at all the time, or you were too young to even let that affect you?
I had every style coach. There were 4 of them that I mentioned, and there was one other gentleman who came in, and he was kind of motivator. And, you know, so you had the one that would yell, and then you had the one that would pull you aside, give you a hug. You had the one that would teach you the basics, or the one that would compliment you. It seemed like my coaches for that period of time, I had like, you know, every different type of coach all in one. I don't ever feel that I got yelled at and I didn't deserve it.
Right.
I got yelled at because I wasn't doing my job, and it's a lot like the military. You don't do your job, the whole team fails.
Right.
So, yeah, I never really took it to heart.
Yeah.
Right.
And as a midget, I had, you know, again, I had John Ogo, and
Right.
and you know, John, he's a great guy.
Right.
And yeah, he really wasn't a big yeller, but he got the best out of us. And we had a rough. Actually, we were saying that both teams were really good. Our midget team actually wasn't very good.
Right.
We only had one win that year. We were probably a lot better than the scores led up to be, but Oak was great. Oak really, I think, really got me to love football.
Right.
You know.
And the thing too about Pop Warner is you see how successful Ansonia has been over the years. A lot of people credit that to Pop Warner, and I really think it starts with Pop Warner, and I really believe that's why Derby, Shelton, Ansonia, Seymour, it's no coincidence that these 4 Valley schools had a great deal of success over the last 30 years because of starting in Pop Warner. I think it starts there without a doubt.
Yeah, I think I'm comfortable saying in our era of playing through our high school years, some of the best athletes in the state came from the Valley.
Right.
You know, you go see a Valley game, and regardless of the score, you saw hitting from the second it started until it ended. And we had a lot of talent in this one area, and that goes back to the feeder programs like Pop Warner, the will and drive of the kids, and some talent on coaching staffs. And you put all that together, and you got some great programs.
Right. Now, Lou DiFilippo, as I mentioned before, really, you know, took that program to different levels, new heights. Were you guys big Lou fans as kids? I mean, if you saw him walk by, you know, he's a big guy too. I mean, did you guys feel like he was a larger-than-life person when you saw him? I mean, you had to be overwhelmed a little bit.
If I could just make one comment,
Sure.
and I'll give it over to you. I was a freshman, and it was Lou's last year, and he was phasing in, Coach DeCenzo, and phasing
Right.
out, but he was still there. And I was there on the Universal set trying to bench press, and he gets over there. He's like 225 pounds. He puts it all on with one arm, ready
Oh,
to
wow.
retire, and pressed it 10 times.
And he was probably pushing 70 at the time.
Yeah, so how do you not respect him
Yeah.
like that?
Right.
He was a physical, you know, amazingly physically strong
Right.
person, but he was a great guy. He was our gym coach.
Yep.
We had a ton of fun in gym, and he was great. He was probably one regret I get out of the program is we missed him by 1 year.
Right.
You know, we were sophomores and playing for varsity or JV,
Right.
and that was his first year out of the program. But you know, he was another guy I idolized. You know,
Right.
just hearing about what he had done and meeting him as a man was.
We were lucky to at least get to know him.
Right.
As Jim.
Would he
was
come
our,
to Pop Warner practices at all, or he didn't really go near that?
Remember? I don't think so. Not that I remember. I know. Not that I remember.
No, we really didn't have that.
I don't think so.
My kid's playing Oxford, Pop Warner, and Coach Stockmall was there motivating the kids, you know, watching some of the practices, and I liked that. But it didn't seem like we had that when we were kids, right?
I don't seem to recall. I remember when I was coaching Pop Warner, Charlie would come down
Right.
and talk. But
Now, did they preach a lot in practice about the tradition of Derby? I mean, at that point, like I said, Derby was on some type of roll. I mean, did they preach that a lot to you guys that, you know, this is your family, this is tradition, you guys got to represent Derby the right way? I mean, I'm sure those guys, Johnny Oko, Carmen DeCenzo, you mentioned Dave Stockmall, I'm sure they drilled that into you guys.
for us, I think there was no real transition from Pop Warner to high school. It was all the same. It was the
Right.
same message, the same formations, the holes were the same. So, I said, yeah, you're right. We were fortunate. You had Carmen and Buster and Oak, who all came from the DiFilippo system.
Right.
So the message was the same all the way through. And you're right. It started right there in Pop Warner. And I think those towns, like you said, Ansonia, it all starts right there. And that's why they're so successful, because their programs,
Right.
they do the same exact thing.
You know, when you talk about continuity in programs, and I'll say a couple of things, and it never rains in Derby.
Right.
When you wear red, you play harder than usual.
Yep.
You don't come on our home and push
Right.
you around. All these things you heard in Pop Warner, you heard as freshman, and you heard varsity. And when you have that continuity with programs, you have some dynamic situations.
Right. And I'm sure, too, seeing Derby get a big win against an Ansonia or a Seymour or even a Cheshire made you guys want to get out on that field the next day for your Pop Warner game and, go out there and kind of duplicate that or try to top it. I mean, just to go out there and play. I mean, seeing that on a Saturday had to just motivate you so much for the next day's game, which is probably a great thing, too, about how they did it. Derby played on Saturdays and you guys played on Sundays. I think that was pretty cool how they, did all that.
Yeah, we were fortunate, again, to grow up in an era that, Derby did very well. So we wanted to do well on the Pop Warner level. We almost, felt like it was a responsibility. You know, we had to do well. And like I said, my midget year, I think we were 1-7, and it was pretty disappointing. So, but we knew, we had some work to do once we became freshmen.
Right.
You hit the nail right on the head. When you're part of a program, you spend 8 years from Pop Warner through varsity, and you look at it as one program, and you don't want to let the program down. You feel a responsibility to play hard. If you're going to lose, our coaches used to say, just leave it on the field, play as hard as you can, and you didn't dare not play hard because of that. No one had to tell you either.
Right.
You got it real quick.
So now, Dan, you mentioned how you didn't play in 7th grade. You said you didn't really like going to practice. It was different for you getting hit and things like that. How was the 8th grade year? I mean, you were a little more mature now, a year older. Did you get the love for football that next year? Like, was the love starting to get there? Or?
I did. I grew probably 6 inches during that time, and I think I was one of the taller kids on the team, which is ironic. But, I really did. I have some great memories of my midget year. A lot of great memories of practice, actually.
Right.
I was, at that point, I think I was starting to feel like I was starting to develop some confidence in myself, and so practice became easier, and then I developed a love for hitting.
Right.
So.
And that 8th grade year too, the varsity had a very good year that year. I think they won the Hoosie and they played in the state final.
Yes.
So I mean, you guys in your last year of Pop Warner were watching a program that was still winning and still competing for a playoff spot. So I mean, right there, had to be motivation. If that wasn't motivation, you'll never be motivated.
Yeah, it was. I mean, like I said, that year, that was a tough game watching. Derby played Ansonia again for the second time of the season and lost it, and it was tough. Even as 8th graders, I'm sure I'm sure I was crying after the game.
Yeah, it was a tough loss. I think there was a big fumble at the goal line or something like that.
I can still see it.
Turned the whole game around. John, now you played junior midgets 8th grade year, or were you on the midgets by that point? You weren't with Dan,
juniors.
Right?
No, I was juniors all the way through.
Right.
Because we were all a little lighter, so we were down in the juniors, and then we went on to
So
freshmen.
now, did you have guys, I mean, you mentioned a couple, Orchano, Mark Saros. I mean, did you have Tommy Abel, Fosse, and those guys on your...
Well, that's what I was going to mention,
Yeah.
is we were all pretty successful in Pop Warner.
Right.
And possibly our 2 best athletes were lurking in the wings because Abel and Fosse were a little too big to play. They were big kids.
Right.
They're big guys now, but they were kind of like that big then.
Yeah.
So they were chomping at the bit freshman year. So you took this strong nucleus, and then you had possibly 2 of the most talented kids onto it. And freshman year, we just, like a freight train. It really clicked together to have those 2 athletes come on board.
Right. So now let's get into freshman year. And I believe, didn't Oko take over the freshman program at that point, or did you have... Oh, you had John D.
Oko would take over the following year.
Right.
But Oak did come up as an assistant coach.
As an assistant.
With D.
Right.
Tommy D'Onofrio.
Tommy.
So I'm sure you guys are no strangers to the personality that John D. was. I mean, if you met him before, you didn't need to, get an education on him or, an introduction. But that had to be a lot of fun that freshman year, just listening to him talk and the stories and things of that nature. I mean, what was freshman year like? Just, being on that field, practice field every day.
We practiced at the Picnic Grove. That's where the freshmen practiced. And to your point, John DeFrancisco is the most animated coach I think I've ever seen.
He was a lot younger
he's a
then too.
Trip.
So.
I'll tell you, he motivated you. He motivated you to play. He was a very talented coach. I think it was a great year. I enjoyed every second of it.
Yeah, you can see by the smiles on our faces that, again, some of my best memories of freshman football were practices.
Right.
You know, there was a lot of great moments, and one in particular that Dee will always bring up. In Pop Warner, I was a fullback.
Right.
And so going into freshman, I figured, hopefully I'm going to be a fullback. So I kept asking him if I was going to get a shot, and it was actually, I guess when everybody signed up, he had 20 running backs and 4 linemen, so he wasn't sure what to do. And it was actually Lou DeFlippo who told him, "D, you take the big kids, you put them on the line."
Right.
So I was one of the bigger kids, so he put me on the line, and I would ask him all the time, "Am I going to get a chance to play fullback?" And he'll tell this story to this day every time I see him.
Right.
So D, if you're watching, I still remember. But you know what? It was great because we used to scrimmage the sophomores when they would come down, and and we did pretty well against them. And I think those were the memories I have is actually in practice. We did pretty well, and I think that's when we knew we had something special going on.
Yeah, we'll talk more about this when we get to the varsity.
Yeah.
But you have a unique situation when you're practicing against some of the best athletes around. It kind of gets easier when you're playing the game almost.
Sure.
It's a weird situation. But it was a really dynamic situation as freshmen too.
Yeah.
It was great.
Now, how'd you guys do freshman year record-wise?
9-1.
9-1.
Yeah.
Wow.
Is that right? Yeah.
9-1.
Your memory's better now.
Who was the one loss against?
Ansonia.
Yeah. So see, I mean that
That's
just
why I
goes
don't forget that one.
That's why it goes to show you can't put a lot of stock into how you do as freshmen because you get older and you also get underclassmen who contribute. But I mean, that's a pretty amazing year. You won every game in the league.
The 3 athletes, right? It was Coppola, Ahern, and McNamara lit us up that day.
They were great.
In the trenches, I think we
and the game was at Nolan Field, I imagine, that year, right?
I think that was in Derby that year.
Was it in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, right there, I mean, you basically, any coach would sign up for a 9-1 record, but you guys as players, that one loss probably was the one you remember most about that season, if I'm not.
Yeah, it counts for about 5, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Now, let me ask you this. Were you both starters on that freshman team? I know you said D put you on the line, but I mean, did you two have to work your way into the starting lineup, or were you both starting that year?
I started guard and linebacker.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to work my way in. And
now, were you kicking at that point yet?
No,
like not even kicking off?
I don't even know how I ended up kicking. I really don't remember.
Right.
I don't either.
No, but I was in the rotation. I was always playing a lot, but then by like the 3rd game or so, I was starting. But I was a D-back back then.
Right.
My problem was I was one of the smaller kids. I was $110 as a freshman. And that's hard because we were playing against kids that were pretty big.
Right. That people don't realize it. Kids don't realize it, but freshman year is really the year where you got to try to enjoy yourself because as you get older, and you move to that next level, there's a big urgency to win. Whereas freshmen, they want to win, but at the same time, you guys are playing together as classmates, and you're having fun at the same time. You guys are it's your team, where, as your underclassmen, it's your team, but it's also somebody else's team as well. Mm-hmm. So I really believe that freshman year, for any type of player, it's a lot of fun because there's pressure, but at the same time, not as much pressure as you face when you get to that next level.
Yeah, I mean, there's no Housatonic League champion for the freshman team,
right?
But so you're playing for pride,
Well, there's also that you have to be able to handle playing in front of lots of people. We used to get lots of people to come to our varsity games. Well, and then you play as freshmen, you get your parents.
Yeah,
there's 100 people. There.
Yeah, and girlfriends,
not thousands.
Yeah.
So
Right.
There was a lot less pressure, if you will. But you played them on Monday afternoons or something like that, right? So it was more relaxed and more fun.
Yeah.
Right. Now, would you say most of the guys, as you know, Mark Saros was your quarterback your senior year. Was he quarterback freshman year? Mm-hmm. I mean, he was. And you had Orchano in the backfield. Mm-hmm. Who was the fullback at the time on that team?
I believe Mark was the fullback and Rich Linder was the tailback.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay,
Angel
so
Martinez.
it was kind of flip-flopped a little bit.
Yeah, actually, I played a little fullback now that I think about it, too.
Yeah, I think you did.
I don't know why,
Yeah,
but,
Right.
I don't know, I just got in there sometimes.
Yep.
So,
right. So
but
basically,
the line nucleus, though, with Shea, Fossey, Jaddick, Stewart,
Yeah.
That was all there.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So now freshman year comes to a close, and Charlie DeCenzo told me this when I had him on. He had no idea that Coach DiFilippo was stepping down. So you guys kind of enter the varsity program in a unique situation because not only is it your first year, but it's also Coach DeCenzo's first year as head coach. You guys, I know, loved playing for Coach DeCenzo, but let me ask you this. Knowing the type of legacy that Lou had, was there some disappointment that he was stepping down and you weren't going to be able to play for him?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I don't know how you feel. I think Coach DeCenzo was great. I was honored to play for him.
Right.
But Lou DiFilippo at that time was the legend. And
right.
It's like if you had a chance to play for Bear Bryant, and he retired right before, I'm sure a college player would be disappointed. So that's the way we felt locally about Lou.
Right.
Yeah. But again, we got to know Charlie really well because he was our English teacher.
Right.
Our freshman year. So, we were excited about having him too because he's a great guy and
right. Now, do you guys remember hearing about Coach Lou step down? I mean, I know he announced it in school that day, but I mean, was there ever any talk like, oh man, I can't believe he quit, or were you just too young to even like really recognize how big it was?
For me, I honestly, I don't recall how I felt, or I think you're right, I might have been just too young, and
right.
But yeah, I really don't recall, how I felt about it. But, yeah.
I was surprised to hear you say Coach DeCenzo didn't know anything about it until the day it happened. And I'm thinking that speculation might have turned into probability. But I had heard a lot my freshman year that he was going to pack it in after that. So I was kind of waiting for it.
Really?
And hoping it wouldn't happen, but expecting it. So I wasn't surprised.
Yeah, basically what Coach DeCenzo said was him and Coach Alu were flabbergasted. They had no idea it was coming, and they were hoping that when, it was lunchtime, they could talk him out of it. They were stunned. They had no idea. So I think that says a lot about Coach Lou because he didn't make it about him. He waited till the season was over, because that could be a distraction for a team. So I think that just tells you, never mind the success he had as a coach, but his legacy, the fact that he did it that way. He waited till the end and didn't, make it about him.
That's what great coaches do.
Yeah, and with him, everybody knows that Coach Lou, he loved his players, but
right.
He loved his coaches like brothers.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's, it's a class act.
Right. So now it's your sophomore year. Let me ask you this. That first day in the team meeting, probably in like maybe early February, late January, you got these great players who are on this team already. I mean, were you guys like little kids, nervous as can be, sitting in that classroom having that meeting, team meeting?
Yeah, I was certainly nervous. That team, that class of 84, 83 football season team, I had some great athletes on that team.
Yes,
but the year before was Steppen and Jeff Collins and the great Ronnie Bartono, those guys on the line.
Right.
They weren't expecting much the following year, and I think that might have got into our heads a little bit.
Right.
That this is a rebuilding year, because that team had an awful lot of talent. I can remember, I don't know if it was Branford or Cheshire, one of the two of them was a co-champion in the Hoosies, and John Dorsch is going down the field, driving with almost no time on the clock to win the game. We fell just short. But that's how good that 5-5 team was.
Right. Now let me ask you, I was going to bring that up as well. So season starts, do you just think it was the team wasn't as talented, or do you think getting used to a new head coach? Why do you think the team started 2-4, they finished strong, finished up 5-5, but it was a tough start. Why do you think it was? Do you just think it was a transition between coaches? There were some good teams that year as well, so Derby ran into some good teams. But what do you attribute that to?
I think that team, if I remember correctly too, that team was kind of a young team.
Right.
It didn't have a whole lot of playing experience. So, that plays into it. I know with one thing that benefited our senior team was that we, as juniors, a lot of us played.
Right.
So I think that team, they were a lot of new kids, kind of young.
What's amazing though about that team is they almost pulled off an upset at Nolan Field that day. I mean, they played. I think Ansonia was ranked maybe number 20 in the country at that time. #1 in the state, obviously. Ton of talent, Glennie Antrim, Earl Stanley, Jeffrey Coppola, Johnny Lawler, John Hunt, ton of talent. And yet they almost pulled off an upset, losing, 19-13. I think Jeff Rice had a phenomenal game, if I'm not mistaken. But, I think that turned that season around. Even though it was a defeat, in a lot of ways, it was also a win because those kids gained confidence and, really, like I said, finished strong the rest of the way.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up. There's a couple of points to that season. The Housatonic League was phenomenal that year.
Right.
So, the losses were all pretty close games. There were some great teams, outside of the Valley as well.
Right.
But the other thing is we ran Wishbone our freshman year with Steppen, Rice, and Collins. With that huge line, and we just 42 smash till you stop it. And the Ansonia game, when we were able to have some success, we trap blocked. Remember, we had Rice go to the other side of the center hole, trap block, and that's where he got close to 200 yards that game. And I think that's when Coach DeCenzo started becoming really comfortable and realizing, okay, I don't have the team to run it down your throat this year, so we're going to have to mix it up. And they started mixing up the formations, and the offense really started flowing. And we almost knocked off Shelton, too.
I think it was 7-3, something like that, right?
We almost knocked them off, and they were really good that year, too. So that team...
Seymour had a great team that year as well. I think they were the Whoosy champs.
Seymour was very good that year.
Right.
And, that team could have been 8-2 and been one of the great teams.
Yeah, and that team, I remember as a sophomore, having to go up against them, and they'd hit you. We were going up against, Ronnie Slowick and Ronnie Leno, Joe Cafaso. I think I still got a bruise from Joe. Those guys hit you. Rob Romano, so many guys to
Jeff
name,
Rice, he's an explosive back. He ran people over all the time. So, they were a talented bunch. They were just a little too young. So, let me ask you two this. How was your sophomore season as far as JV-wise? Not so much the record, but did you two think that you had a good year? Did you feel like you needed more work? How would you, go evaluate your season that year? I know you're young and it's hard to remember, but
JV part of it was great. We got some great games in with JVs and got a good chance to see who you're going to be competing against in the future. I was able to get in a few times somehow varsity my sophomore year.
Right.
And I think what was the most interesting part of that year is they started realizing how fast I wasn't. And I became an outside linebacker that year instead of a D-back. And I liked it more. I didn't like, one-on-one coverage against, you talk about Seymour being great. I had to cover Lepresti, I think his name was.
Right.
He was
very good player.
Fast. And you get put on an island and, it's tough. So that was a transition year. I got some playing time. I think I had a lot of fun JV.
Right.
Got a little bit of varsity in there. So that was a great year, given it was a transition year.
Right. Yeah. And what would you say, a good year for you?
Yeah, I think we had a good record. I want to say it was 8-2.
Now, were you playing both sides of the ball that year on the
JVs, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So, right away you were getting in. So, maybe you're not getting a lot of varsity time, but you're gaining experience just by being out there because, you're playing against, big teams and you're also playing against kids you're probably going to meet up with, down the road. So now your junior year comes, and here's my thing with, varsity and starting varsity. Derby had so much talent back then. They had so many great players. It was very hard to get on the field till your senior year. So if you didn't play a lot of varsity till senior year, it wasn't really a knock at you. It was just, there were guys ahead of you that were so good that, you just had to wait your turn. So what was junior year like? I know you both had to play a lot of JV again. Were you frustrated, or did you just kind of understand that, down the road it was going to be your turn?
For me, I rotated at linebacker every other series, so I did get a lot of varsity time as a junior.
Right.
And then when we played JVs, I was only allowed to play the line.
Right.
I wasn't allowed to play defense then. So it was good to get that varsity experience.
Right.
I got in a little bit at the beginning of the year. We had an outside linebacker. I think Jeff Rice and Ray Regan stayed back one extra year. And Ray Regan was the outside linebacker, but he hurt his knee for the first few games. So I was rotating in two substitutes. Another guy were rotating in, and I got a little bit of varsity experience. But I wasn't as talented as the other guys out there, and I knew it. And I was doing the best I could. But what Coach did, which was great, is he got me in on almost every special teams.
Right.
And, I just love being able to try to participate on a kickoff or a punt, just try to get my helmet in there somewhere and make a play.
Yep.
And, I don't know, I guess I treated that as my game. When Ray Regan came back and played pretty much exclusively, my game was special teams. I had to make a play on special teams, and I enjoyed it. You can get challenges within the game, and that's what I did at least is try to challenge myself to do something good on special teams.
Right, and that team, they don't get a lot of, people don't talk about that team a lot, but that was a very good team, an 8-2 team, very underrated, and I mean, they bounced back from that 5-5 season. They had a great year. I think the 2 losses were to Ansonia and Shelton, so knocked off a good Cheshire team. Good Shea was even pretty good that year and knocked off Seymour. So I mean, it was a real good year going into your senior year. A lot of definitely a lot to look forward to going into that last year.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons why that team's not talked about more is the fact that 2 losses, but the 2 we say that are worth lots of losses. I remember playing Ansonia at our field junior year, and they lit it up on us pretty good and shut us out.
Right, that was a real good Ansonia team too. They had pretty much everybody back. They were very good.
They were good, and then we go play Shelton, and it's really close, and then they score 2 quick touchdowns at the end, and they lit us up in the end. So like we said earlier in this program, there's wins, and then there's the big games, and Shelton and Ansonia are right at the top of the list of big games.
Yep.
And I think that's why that team doesn't get talked about. But you're right. Not only did we have an outstanding running game with Rice, and Warch was getting a lot of playing time, but you also had Oliver, who could read defenses really well.
Yeah, he was a very underrated quarterback.
All of a sudden, this guy Tommy Abel, everybody was like, "Whoa." You better double cover him real quick. So you double cover him, and Rice runs down your throat. Yeah. So it was a very good offensive team with a solid defense.
Right. So now you go into the winter of your junior year. You're going to be seniors. Dan, you get elected captain. Now let me ask you this: for a guy who left the program at Pop Warner, didn't play, in 7th grade, came back. And, you weren't really sure what kind of player you were going to be. Like you said, you didn't think you were going to be good at it. What was that feeling like to be elected captain? Because, I mean, that's a big honor in Derby to be a captain.
It is. It's honestly, it's something that I've cherished forever.
Right.
To be a captain. And honestly, I wasn't a captain because I was a great player and anything like that, but I wasn't afraid to speak up. So I think my more of my leadership skills than my football skills.
Right.
If you look at the other 3 captains, all were great players. Players. Our team, any one of us could have been captain. It should have been, I think we had 14 seniors. We should have had 14 captains, in my opinion, because every one of us was integral. But as a captain, I still remember the day my dad came home and I told him I was captain. It was, it's great.
So he's being a little modest. We had 4 great captains. He was a great athlete. He's, when you're in the middle and you're driving people off the ball, you get overlooked. But Abel and Orch were the ones making the big plays, and then Fossey, he seemed like he can go sideline to sideline in a flash. But this guy was driving people off the ball and holding down the middle.
Not to mention, he wasn't the tallest lineman, so I mean, he was like gutsy lineman out there every play.
But to Dan's point. Well, first of all, I don't think anyone on the team didn't vote for him as captain. He was a leader and a motivator, and it was great to play for you as a captain. But there's other guys like Mike Jadek was a leader. Mark Searles, he ran the offense. We would get a little wild up. Come on, guys, calm down. So to your point, we had a lot of leaders on that team. We deferred and respected the captains, but the captains also gave us the autonomy to also help them lead. So, maybe we did have 14 captains. And a couple of juniors, too, were leaders.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was pretty neat.
So what was the goal that you guys set for yourselves? I'm sure winning the league, because, I mean, back then, Derby always set out to win the league. But I got to believe in the back of your minds, and we're going to get to this in part 2, I got to believe the biggest goal was to finally beat Ansonia and get that streak over. I mean, that streak had been going on for 11 straight games, 9 years. I'm sure that was the biggest goal before anything else. What would you say?
That's exactly what I would say. We could have lost every game, but as long as we win that game.
Right.
we've been we were on the losing end for 10 years, and
Did you guys beat them in Pop
loss.
Warner at all?
No.
No, so you'd never beaten them?
No.
Wow.
We beat them
our junior year
in a
JV. So we
but
were undefeated that year, our
But-
junior
Right.
year.
Jeff Capola.
They didn't play in that game.
McNamara,
Right.
Pat Ahern
Right.
didn't play.
No.
Right.
The way I wouldn't go as far as saying losing every other game.
No, I guess not.
But I will say that I don't know if this is wrong, and I apologize to the coaches. The Housatonic League didn't mean as much to me, and you want to know why? You lose all the time to this great team, Ansonia, and they played in the NVL, and we played in the Hoosie, and then all the fans start saying, well, the Hoosie's tougher. We beat each other up all year long. They play cupcake. That's a bunch of bull. They had great athletes.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah. Great coaches, too.
I couldn't wait to that game, and we got yelled at appropriately by the coaches. Don't look to that game. Play this game. Play this
Right.
game.
Right.
But as soon as we got, I think it was Sheehan out of the way the week before, that whole week was great.
Right.
Be on the field with Terry McNamara was MVP of the entire state.
Yeah.
Right.
Jeff Capola, 3-year, starting quarterback, I think 2-time All-State. Pat Ahern was
Right.
1 or 2-time All-State. Jesulitis guys.
Yeah,
It was
absolutely.
you were on the field in front of a zillion people watching you play those guys, and I couldn't wait.
Right.
Charlie did a great job of keeping us, though. You're right. One game at a time.
Right.
And it wasn't talk about the Ansonia game. It was, let's focus on Notre Dame and Fairfield was our first game, and then Amity.
I've always said the best way they do this Ansonia Derby game, and I wish they would still do it, is they play it the 6th game of the year, which actually is the second half of the year. It starts the season because it gives you something to look forward to. If you play them in the first or second game, you have other games to look forward to, but it kind of is a letdown because that game is the game, and you want that game to, have significance. And if you play it in the second or third game, it's not the same. So I really thought that was a great job by the people who put that game together.
And there's more of a reason why it's great is we play and you look up in the stands, there'd be a whole bunch of them watching us, and then they'd play and you look up in the stands, a whole bunch of us were watching them. I watched them light up Shelton, the second game of the year, and poor Shelton. They had a terrible first half and ended strong. Some good talented kids, but it was, God, it had to be 42-0 in the third quarter. Everybody was sitting down. They just lit them up, and it was funny as Ansonia was scoring. Me and a bunch of the defensive guys. Like Ronnie Shea, we're like, that guy slipped. That guy did this, that guy did that. And then we started looking at each other like, oh boy.
Right.
These guys are good.
We got to see each other play a lot because we played a lot of our games were Friday nights
Yeah.
because we
Right.
had the lights. That was the first year
Right.
of the lights.
So, realistically, we know that Ansonia was the big goal, but what was the second goal? Was the state championship did it even enter any of your minds at the time, or were you thinking more about just...
I think, obviously being in the Housatonic League, we focused on the Housatonic League title.
And the state playoffs, it was only in its 10th year of existence, I believe. So it had been there, but it was still relatively new. So, it was, trying to look forward to it. It didn't have like the build-up that it would have years later. So it was still kind of new. But at the same time, you guys probably didn't realize it at the time, but you were playing for that goal to get to that, point, which, we're going to get into in part 2. But so you would just basically say the goal was to win the Housatonic League. That was your second goal.
Definitely.
Right.
Mine's a little different. I didn't think about the Hoosie much at all. I wrestled a large part of my life for Coach Buster Jadek.
Right.
He's my mentor. He's an amazing man. And he used to have a philosophy in wrestling. You take care of yourself, and you add up everybody taking care of themselves, and the team will be okay.
Right.
So that mentality.
I think you had come off a state title maybe your freshman year.
Sophomore year we won.
Sophomore year,
wrestling.
so you kind of tasted that a little bit.
Yeah, that was cool.
Right. So you kind of had a good idea what it was like. Obviously, you had an idea that what it was like to be a champion. So I'm sure, you wanted to experience that again.
Well, carrying that mentality forward, I went into the senior year saying I'm going to do the best I can to make a difference. You have to understand I was a good football player on a team of great football players.
Right.
And my thing is I wanted to be in the middle of as big a play as I could every single time.
Right.
And anything whether it was a kickoff or a punt or whatever, it didn't matter. I wanted to hit somebody and I wanted to make a difference. So I kind of was more internally focused, I guess, to try to contribute to this great team. And then, as we got closer to the end, it was like, holy cow, we might go to the States. Then it started becoming more of a goal.
Right. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate you coming on tonight. Part 1 was great. And we've kind of basically, they've built you up. They've set the stage for this great championship season that we're going to discuss in Part 2. Until next time, I'm Mike Kenichi for Hometown Heroes saying good night, everyone.
How do we do?